It feels like we're constantly bombarded with news about global problems. And yeah, those challenges are absolutely real. But what if the single biggest story of the last 2 centuries is actually one of incredible, mind-blowing progress? We're going to pull the camera back, way back, to see how humanity pulled off something truly remarkable.
Okay, so let's try a little thought experiment. If you could hop in a time machine and set the dial for the year 1820, what would you even find? I mean, what was life really like for the average person on this planet? Well, the reality is probably more extreme than any of us can really imagine. Just look at this. Back in 1820, a staggering 9 out of every 10 people on Earth lived in what we'd now call extreme poverty. 9 out of 10. Today, that number has absolutely plummeted to less than 1 in 10. This isn't just some small tweak, it's one of the most incredible, monumental shifts in the entire human story. So, how on earth did this happen? All right, to understand this massive change, we have to talk about what economists call the Great Escape from widespread poverty. And it wasn't just one thing, but this incredibly powerful engine that slowly started to fire up all around the world. And the engine that drove this whole thing, according to all the data, was economic growth. Think about it. A rising tide of new technology, of industrialization, of productivity. This was the single most powerful force that lifted billions of people out of the kind of poverty that had been the norm for, well, pretty much all of human history. Okay, but this brings up a really tricky question, right? How can we even compare these things? A dollar back in 1820s London is a totally different beast than a dollar today in, say, Nairobi or New York. The numbers just, they don't mean the same thing. So, researchers have this really clever tool to get around that. It's called the international dollar. And the key thing here is that this isn't about, currency exchange rates. No, it's all about what your money can actually buy. A loaf of bread, a pair of shoes, a month's rent. This is what lets us make a real, honest-to-goodness, apples-to-apples comparison, and it's what makes a chart like the one we just saw even possible. But, economic growth didn't just happen on its own. It was tangled up with another absolutely massive change, a demographic revolution that completely changed how we live and how we build our families. I mean, think about this. Just a few generations back, the global average was for a woman to have around 5 kids. 5! Today, that number's been chopped by more than half, down to about 2.3. That is a huge shift in the basic structure of families and societies everywhere. And that, of course, makes you wonder, why? What on earth could possibly change something so personal, so fundamental as how many kids people have?
Well, the answer seems to lie in 2 of the most powerful drivers for human progress we've ever seen: big improvements in health and a huge expansion of education. They basically created this incredible virtuous cycle that reshaped everything. So when you dig into the data, it really points to 3 big things that are all connected. First, child mortality. It's simple, really. When parents trust that their kids will actually survive and grow up, they tend to have fewer of them. Then you add in education for women. As women get more education, they get more economic opportunities, more choices. And finally, as places get wealthier, raising a kid just gets more expensive. You invest more in them. So families naturally get smaller. And you can really see this cycle in action here. In the past, high child mortality was just a tragic fact of life. But then, as healthcare gets better, as nutrition gets better, more kids survive. And that, in turn, allows families to plan differently, to invest more in each child, which leads to that drop in fertility rates we saw. So you can almost think of these 3 things, health, education, and economic growth, as like the 3 sides of a triangle. Each one makes the others stronger. And we see this playing out in global spending. Overall, the world is spending more on health and education, which is great. But, and this is a really important but that the source material points out, that triangle isn't always balanced. There are still huge differences in how much countries are investing, and that means progress is pretty unequal. Okay, so we've got economic growth. We've got this huge demographic shift driven by better health and education. The final massive piece of this 200-year puzzle is the thing that basically put everything on hyperdrive: globalization. Yeah, the sources we're looking at are really clear about this. You simply cannot tell the story of the last 200 years of progress without talking about globalization. This growing web connecting the world through trade, it was like a powerful gas pedal for everything else we've been talking about. And the basic idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Instead of every single country trying to make every single thing for itself, countries can specialize. They can focus on what they do best, most efficiently, and then they just trade with other countries for the other stuff they need. When that happens, the whole global system gets more efficient. And over the long haul, that creates more wealth for pretty much everyone involved. Now, it's really important to note, the source material is careful to point out that this process isn't perfect. While globalization is a huge engine for overall growth, the benefits don't always get shared equally. It can create winners and losers, both within countries and between them.
So, after this wild ride through 200 years of data, what's the big takeaway? What's the secret sauce, the recipe that powered this great escape from poverty?
Well, it's not just one thing. It's this powerful mix. You've got economic growth as the fuel. You've got those big demographic shifts changing the very structure of our families. And it's all built on a foundation of healthier, better educated people living in a world that's more connected than ever before. Each piece makes the other stronger. And so that leaves us with one last, really big question. This recipe, this combination of factors, has totally reshaped our world. But when we look at the challenges ahead, things like climate change, AI, massive inequality, will this exact same recipe work for the next 100 years? Or are we going to need to find totally new ingredients for the next chapter of human progress?